If you're ready to begin this journey, don't forget to hit subscribe right now. The story begins right after this. The mysterious stranger and the beautiful girl, unlocking the secrets of faith. In a small village quietly nestled between the mountains and forests, where people live humbly with nature, there was a girl named Miriam. Her family was very poor. Her father, an old potter, once made beautiful bowls and plates. But due to his old age and poor health, he no longer had the ability to continue his work. Her mother, although loving and caring for her children, could do nothing to help the family escape poverty. Since childhood, Miriam had been taught the pottery craft by her father. Though she wasn't as wealthy as the others in the village, she always took pride in the work she did. Every time she held the clay in her hands, Miriam felt as though she was becoming one with the earth and sky, as if all the hardships of life disappeared within the pieces she created. She believed that each bowl and each vase carried the soul of the land, of nature, and contained the very best that she could give to the world. Miriam didn't just make pottery to earn a living, she did it with all her heart. She wasn't just skilled with every detail, but she also put a part of her soul and hope into it. She hoped that her creations would bring joy and tranquility to others. However, fate was never easy on Miriam, and she couldn't escape the sadness of a life lived in poverty. Every day, she worked hard, but the money was never enough to support her family. Despite this, she never gave up. She always believed that things would change, that one day her pottery would be recognized by the world. One day, while Miriam was working diligently in her pottery shop, a strange event occurred. A man dressed in white, riding a white horse, appeared at the gate of her home. He was not from the village, but had a strange and proud demeanor. His long black hair, sharp gaze, and strong yet gentle hands made him seem like he belonged to another world, one that couldn't be explained. Before Miriam could understand what was happening, the man walked into her pottery shop without saying a word. He looked at the pottery she had made and simply shook his head. His eyes seemed to be staring at something only he could comprehend, but there was also a sense of disdain emanating from his gaze. Suddenly, he raised his hand and, with incredible strength, swept through the room. Instantly, all of Miriam's pottery shattered into pieces, crashing to the ground with deafening noise. It was an incomprehensible and brutal act. These weren't just inanimate objects, they were everything she had poured her effort and heart into. In that moment, Miriam felt as if the ground beneath her feet was collapsing. She stood frozen, tears welling up in her eyes, staring at the broken fragments of her dreams and hopes. But strangely, she didn't feel anger or hatred. Instead, there was only a heart-wrenching pain. Her tears flowed, not because of the material loss, but because of the feeling of failure within herself. She felt as if something invisible had taken everything from her. Then, a sudden thought flashed through her mind. Why should I stand here and cry? What is lost, but I cannot let it destroy me. I must face it, not just for myself, but for my family. As Miriam stood there, the shards of pottery at her feet, the man looked at her coldly, but there was something different in his gaze now. He said nothing, only remained silent and stared at her. Then, in a strange moment, the man withdrew a precious ring, a ring that gleamed with light, as if it didn't belong to this world. This is compensation for what has been lost, he said in a hoarse voice, but still with a gentleness. He handed the ring to Miriam, as if it were a part of a fate she could not avoid. Miriam looked at the ring, feeling a strange warmth emanating from it. But at the same time, she felt an eerie sense of unease. This ring wasn't just a gift, it seemed to contain something much larger, something she couldn't fully comprehend. Yet, she decided to accept it, not out of greed, but for an inexplicable reason. It was something vague, a feeling she couldn't put into words, but she knew she could not refuse it. Miriam returned home, the ring in her hand still emitting a gentle glow. That night, when the moonlight streamed through the small window and illuminated the ring, a strange feeling filled her heart. She sat down in the old chair in her room, gazing at the ring, sensing a coldness from it, yet at the same time, there was an invisible force as if it were calling to her. The small noises in the house startled her. She didn't dare think too much about the ring, but it seemed impossible to pull herself away from it. She felt as though an invisible thread was pulling her closer to secrets she couldn't understand. It was a feeling that was both mesmerizing and fearful, yet she couldn't ignore it. When Miriam placed the ring on the table, she looked back at the broken pottery pieces scattered on the floor. The scene still vividly played in her mind. She couldn't forget the cold gaze of the man as he destroyed everything she had created. For the first time in her life, Miriam felt the surge of helplessness and anger rise within her. But instead of anger, she noticed something strange. The man, though he had destroyed her hard work, had left behind a magical gift. The ring wasn't just a precious item, it seemed to contain some kind of power she couldn't fully comprehend. Part of her felt afraid, but another part felt drawn to the ring itself. The next day, when Miriam went out to gather materials for her pottery, she encountered strange events again. She couldn't explain what was happening. As she passed the small river near her house, she noticed the waves of water suddenly swirling with great force, despite there being no wind. The birds flying around her abruptly stopped, as if everything was waiting for something. Miriam stood still, feeling the presence of something very different. She turned and looked into the distance, where the silhouette of the mysterious man briefly flashed before her eyes. She wasn't sure if it was an illusion, but the feeling was very real. That evening, as Miriam was returning home, she again heard the soft sound of horse hooves from afar. Her heart began to beat faster, as part of her felt something very familiar, and another part feared what would happen next. When she saw the man appear, she felt a chill, as if time had stopped. He was not an ordinary man, he was a being with a power she couldn't imagine. Although Miriam had always sensed the mystery in his gaze, this time his eyes held something different. There was a deep understanding of her pain, and her dreams, as if he could see right through everything in her heart. "You have accepted the ring," he said, his voice soft yet commanding. Miriam looked into his eyes, unable to speak. She felt a strange wave of emotion overwhelm her. She couldn't understand what she was feeling, but a part of her acknowledged that, no matter what, this man was not an enemy. "Do you know, the ring is not just a gift. It is a connection, a door to things you cannot imagine," he continued. Miriam stood still, not daring to ask more questions. Although she didn't fully understand his words, she could feel that her life had changed forever since she accepted the ring. And so, the man continued to help her, not just once but many times. Every time she faced difficulties in her work, he appeared and helped her overcome them. Every vase, every bowl she created became famous throughout the region, and people began to come from all over just to admire the wonderful works she had made. Despite her growing success, Miriam couldn't stop thinking about the mysterious man and the ring he had given her. She felt as though she was being pulled into something she couldn't control. Every time the man helped her, she felt as if she were losing a part of her freedom, a part of her own identity. Miriam began to feel the change in her life more distinctly. She had become famous, her pottery business had flourished, but she didn't feel complete happiness. She started to feel as though she was trapped in a never-ending cycle with no way out. She asked herself, was she becoming too dependent on this man? Was the ring truly magic, or was it a trap he had set for her? She didn't want to live in this unease forever, but she didn't know how to escape. Each night, as she sat in the quiet room, Miriam felt surrounded by vague thoughts, unanswered questions. The connection between her and the man grew stronger, but she couldn't escape the feeling of unease. If you're still watching this video and think Miriam should keep the ring, please comment number 1 below to let me know you're here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I encourage you to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss any videos. Your support helps us continue creating great content to inform and inspire you. Miriam woke up every morning, the feeling of fatigue and worry always clinging to her. Her life, once humble but peaceful, had now been disrupted. The ring that the mysterious man had given her was no longer just a simple object. It felt like an invisible vortex, seemingly pulling her into a world she couldn't control. Waves of emotion constantly crashed upon her soul, making her feel confused and uncertain. She began to ask herself, do I really want to live my life relying on this man forever? She sensed that everything around her was changing. Her work, although thriving, made her feel that something was being lost: the freedom, the identity, and the resilience she once had. Miriam decided she had to uncover the truth about the ring and the man. She felt that, no matter what, she needed to explore these mysteries herself instead of continuing to be controlled by them. One night, as Miriam sat in her room, reflecting on all the strange events that had occurred, she suddenly heard the sound of hooves galloping nearby. Her heart raced. It felt like something was fated to happen. The man appeared again, but this time not with the cold, distant demeanor he had shown before. This time, his gaze was filled with empathy, and there was something as if he knew every thought in her heart. You're worried about the ring and about me, aren't you? His voice was gentle, yet there was an unusual power in it, as if he could control everything. Miriam didn't respond, only silently gazed into his eyes. She felt hypnotized, yet also filled with curiosity. That night, he didn't rush to leave but sat down beside her. The feeling in her heart was a contradiction between fear and expectation. Do you want to know the truth about me? The man asked. Miriam nodded. She couldn't continue living in this ambiguity. She needed to know what she was truly facing. You will know everything, but be prepared. This truth will change everything you've known about yourself, your life, and the world around you. Miriam felt a restless stir in her chest. But then, the man slowly explained the origins of the ring and the connection between him and her. He was a jinn, a being from the invisible world, with the ability to interfere with human fate. Each jinn had a mission to help people overcome challenges, but in return, they also created an unbreakable bond with the ones they helped. This ring is not just a gift, it is the bond between you and me. You cannot be separated from me, just as I cannot leave you. You will always have me by your side, whether you want it or not. The man's words stunned Miriam. She couldn't believe it. She couldn't understand if he was telling the truth or just testing her. But when she looked into his eyes, she felt an invisible force, something she couldn't resist. Miriam sat there, in the dim shadows of the night, with the ring in her hand. She could feel the magic, but also the danger emanating from it. She asked herself, can I live without him by my side? Can I break free from this connection and still keep everything I love? These questions repeated in her mind like violent waves. She couldn't find the answer. Every time she thought about rejecting the man's help, a deep fear would rise in her heart. But if she continued like this, she would lose herself. She began to realize that, even though there were times when the man helped her, she couldn't live forever under his protection. She couldn't accept this dependence. It's time for me to make my own decisions. I won't let anyone, whether a jinn or anyone else, decide my life for me, Miriam thought to herself. She placed the ring on the table, looking at it one last time. I won't let it control me anymore, she decided. Miriam decided she had to break free from this strange bond. She didn't know if she could succeed, but she knew one thing. Only when I dare to face my fear and overcome it, will I be able to find myself again. The next day, she began working harder than ever before. She poured all her focus into her pottery, not allowing thoughts of the man and the ring to distract her. Each piece she created was made with all her heart and passion, as if this was her way of regaining control over her life. Then, as she was about to head out to sell her pottery, she noticed something strange. Although no one was around, she felt as if someone was watching her. She turned around and saw the mysterious man standing in the distance, gazing at her with a look that was both gentle and full of understanding. "Have you made your decision?" he asked, his voice soft yet powerful. Miriam stood still, saying nothing. She simply nodded, feeling a sense of peace in her heart. "Then, I won't trouble you anymore. You have found your path, and I will no longer intervene." He turned away and walked off, leaving Miriam alone in the darkness. This time, she didn't feel fear. Instead, a sense of freedom filled her heart. She knew that, no matter what, she had taken control of her own destiny. Since Miriam decided to abandon the ring and no longer let the mysterious man control her life, she felt as though she had severed an invisible bond that had tied her to a world she could not fully understand. But at the same time, she felt a strange loneliness, as if a part of herself had drifted away from her. Every day, as she worked, Miriam felt changes in her life. Her pottery business continued to grow, but she no longer felt the joy she once had. Although her creations were still beautiful and loved by many, she felt as if something important was missing. She remembered the times when she lived in harmony with the earth and the clay, a time when she wasn't bound by forces beyond her control. But now, the feeling of losing her freedom kept her from working peacefully. She began noticing strange signs. At night, unusual sounds echoed through the house. She often heard faint whispers, as though someone were calling her name from somewhere, from within the darkness. This feeling couldn't be fully explained, but it made it impossible for her to sleep soundly. Shadows seemed to pass by in her line of sight, cold winds would blow through, as if some invisible force were watching her every step. Miriam couldn't make sense of it. She began to feel as if she were being haunted by things she couldn't explain. One afternoon, while Miriam was sitting by the furnace, firing her pottery, a strong gust of wind suddenly blew through the window, extinguishing the flame. Suddenly, a familiar figure appeared at the door. Miriam looked up, and then she realized who it was. The mysterious man she had rejected was standing before her, with sharp eyes full of understanding. This time, there was no coldness or distance like before. He approached Miriam and looked into her eyes, saying nothing. Miriam couldn't stop looking into his eyes, and a strange feeling rose within her, a mix of fear and irresistible curiosity. "You can't leave me," he said, his voice no longer cold, but firm and resolute. "The ring is a part of you. It's not just an object. It's the connection between you and this world, between you and me. You can't escape it." Miriam felt a lump in her throat. She had thought that she could leave the past behind and rebuild her life. But now, the man was telling her that she couldn't escape him. "But I don't want this," Miriam said, her voice trembling. "I don't want to be bound by something I don't understand. I want freedom. I want to live my own life, with no one deciding for me." The man looked at her silently for a moment, then sighed softly. "You can be free," he said. "But freedom doesn't mean there is no connection. Everything is connected. And you, Miriam, you are no exception." His words shocked Miriam. A part of her felt the truth in his words. But another part felt fear, because if that was the truth, could she really control her own life? After the meeting with the man, Miriam couldn't stop thinking about what he had said. She realized that the ring was truly not just a gift, but a connection to another world, to a part of herself that she had never understood. But she still couldn't accept it. Miriam decided she had to uncover the truth about the ring, about her connection with the jinn, and the world she had never known. She couldn't continue to live in ambiguity, and she couldn't continue to be manipulated by forces she couldn't control. She turned to the elders in the village, those who had experience with strange phenomena. An old woman, after hearing Miriam's story, shared with her an ancient tale about a powerful jinn, a being who could connect with humans through magical objects. "The ring you hold," the old woman said, "is a precious item that jinn use to connect with the person they help. But you must understand that when you accept the help of a jinn, you have agreed to a pact that cannot be easily broken. The jinn can help you overcome challenges, but it also means you lose a part of your freedom." The old woman's words made Miriam feel a heavy weight in her chest. She realized that the ring was not only a symbol of help, but also a bond. A bond she couldn't simply ignore. And when she understood this, Miriam began to feel a powerful inner conflict rising within her. Still, Miriam did not give up on her dream of freedom. She decided to face the challenges without letting any force dictate her destiny. She understood that freedom didn't mean rejecting all help, but rather mastering herself and not allowing anyone or anything to control her life. The next day, when the sun had risen, Miriam went outside again, the ring in hand. She was no longer afraid. She decided not to abandon the ring, but she would not let it control her. She would take control of her own destiny, no matter how many challenges she faced. And so, Miriam began a new journey. She no longer felt haunted by the ring or the mysterious man. She had decided that, from now on, she would be the one to decide her own fate. As the days passed, Miriam gradually became accustomed to the life she had chosen. Her pottery business continued to thrive, and her creations were not only sold in the village but also attracted traders from distant regions. However, the peace she had found was short-lived. One morning, while Miriam was working, she again felt a cold breeze brush against her. This sensation, once more, reminded her of the days when the ring still lay in her hand, when everything seemed out of control. Once again, she began to feel as though something invisible was threatening her. This feeling became more pronounced each night when, sitting by the fire, she would hear soft whispers from the darkness. These sounds were not caused by the wind or any object, they seemed as though something unseen was watching her. One night, when everything had settled into silence, she couldn't stop thinking about the words the old woman had told her earlier. When you accept the help of a jinn, you agree to a pact that cannot be easily undone. These words echoed in her mind. She decided to face the truth once again. Could these strange occurrences be the result of still carrying the ring? Had she truly escaped her connection with the mysterious man, or was she only deceiving herself? One evening, When Miriam went outside to clear her mind after a day of work, she sensed a different presence. Her heart began to race, and the feeling of fear slowly crept up. She didn't know why, but her instincts told her that something was about to happen. And sure enough, as she walked down a quiet path, a figure suddenly appeared before her. It wasn't the mysterious man, but there was a dark, ominous presence, as if something from another world was rising. A jinn whom she had once heard about was now standing before her. "You can't run forever," the jinn said, his voice full of authority yet tinged with a hint of sympathy. "The ring is the door that led you into this world, and you cannot deny that connection." Miriam looked into the jinn's eyes, feeling the pain in his words. She felt as though she were being caught in an emotional storm, one where she couldn't tell if she could overcome it all. "But I don't want to live under your protection anymore," Miriam responded, her voice full of determination. "I want to stand on my own. I don't want to be tied to this world anymore." The jinn smiled with understanding. "You don't understand. You've chosen this path, and now you must face the truth. Everything comes with a price, Miriam. You cannot deny your fate." His words pierced her heart like daggers. She couldn't ignore the intense inner struggle growing within her. Miriam knew the path ahead would not be easy, but she couldn't let herself be defeated. The jinn continued, this time with a more serious tone. "You can't run forever. The ring is not just a gift I gave you, it is the connection between you and my world. This relationship cannot be erased, unless you do something that very few can: give up yourself." Miriam felt as though a wave shattered within her heart. "Give up myself? I can't do that," she said, but deep inside, she knew she couldn't go back. The jinn looked at her with tenderness, but his eyes still held a harshness. "You want freedom, don't you? But freedom doesn't come from severing all connections. You must understand that, to free yourself, you cannot just give up the ring. You must face yourself, face the things you've always avoided." Miriam felt choked. She began to understand that the battle wasn't just about freeing herself from the jinn's hold, but a deep journey within herself. She had to confront the fears and weaknesses she had always tried to avoid. She could no longer live in this fear and uncertainty. Miriam decided she would not give up, not the ring, but herself. She would find herself again, and would not let anyone or anything control her life. "I will be free," Miriam whispered. "I won't let anyone decide my fate." Suddenly, the ring glowed, emitting a brilliant light, and right after, the jinn's figure vanished into the dark space. Miriam stood there, feeling the tranquility envelop her. She no longer felt fear. A strange feeling of freedom filled her heart. Miriam turned back, gazing at the dim light of the candles in her home. She knew that her journey wasn't over. She would still have to face challenges, but now, she no longer felt alone. She had found the strength within herself, and that was true freedom. If you're still watching this video and believe Miriam made the right decision, please comment number 6 below to let me know you're here, and if you haven't subscribed yet, I encourage you to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss any videos. Your support helps us continue creating great content to inform and inspire you. Since Miriam decided to take control of her own life, she faced harsh challenges. However, she no longer felt fear or helplessness. By letting go of her dependency on the ring, she also freed herself from the invisible bonds she couldn't understand. The ring, which had once been an important part of her life, was no longer a symbol of help. It had become a symbol of dependence and attachment, something Miriam no longer wanted to endure. That day, when Miriam stood facing the figure of the jinn, she no longer felt the pressure or the bindings. She realized that freedom didn't come from avoiding challenges, but from confronting and overcoming the mental attachments she had created. Liberation wasn't just about removing material things, but about an inner awakening, understanding the connection between herself and everything around her. In that moment, Miriam clearly saw that the path to freedom and liberation was self-understanding. She didn't need to live under the protection of any force, because true strength always existed within herself. This was an important lesson that the Ksatagarbha imparts: we cannot escape suffering, but we can transform it. The Ksatagarbha teaches that all suffering can be transformed if we view it correctly and persist in practicing. Like Miriam, when she dared to face the truth about herself and the world around her, she realized that liberation wasn't something that could be gained from the outside, but an internal process, a spiritual awakening. The lesson from this story is enlightenment through suffering and the ability to transform suffering into growth. This is also the path pointed out by the Ksatagarbha. Liberation is not an escape, but facing and accepting everything that comes to us. By accepting the nature of suffering, we can gradually free our minds from all bindings, not only in the material world but also in the spiritual one. After confronting the truth about the ring and the jinn, Miriam chose her own path. She understood that, no matter how difficult, only by living truthfully with herself, not allowing anything or anyone to control her life, would she truly find freedom and inner peace. She had completed her journey, not by running from the truth, but by facing and overcoming it. Do you see yourself in Miriam's story? Are you facing challenges in life that feel inescapable? Are you feeling trapped in habits, negative thoughts, or dependencies you can't change? Miriam's journey is one of seeking freedom and liberation, and it's a journey we can all walk. We don't need to search for liberation from the outside, but begin from within, starting with how we face ourselves and the world around us. Just like in the Ksatagarbha, we must accept suffering, learn how to transform it, and free ourselves from unnecessary attachments. Thank you for joining us on this journey. We would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below and share something you've learned from this story and how you plan to apply these lessons to your own life. Your thoughts are important to us, so don't hesitate to share them. Reading your comments gives us great motivation and encouragement. If you found this video helpful and think it could inspire others, please like, subscribe, and share your support. This will help us continue creating valuable content to inform and inspire you. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.